Americans and citizens, thank you for coming out early this Saturday morning to express your support for racial justice throughout our nation, in every state, county, city, and town across our land. Thank you, Ms. Joanna Schultz, President, NAACP Local Chapter Number 4036, and Commissioner Jermaine Wilson, founder and leader of the Unity in the Community movement, for inviting me to deliver remarks at today's Unity Walk. I'm going to modify my remarks because it is very, very hot out here, but I do want to take 2 or 3 minutes to share the essence of what I had planned to say and get to the heart of it. One of the things I was going to do was to summarize the statement from the Leavenworth City Commission that we prepared and issued last Tuesday at our weekly meeting. What I will say is that statement, although short, came from the bottom of our hearts. And I would say go to the social media accounts of the City of Leavenworth, the city's website, to see what we had to say. And all I can say is it did come from the bottom of our heart, and it began with extending our sympathies to the family of George Floyd. In trying to put George Floyd's death in perspective to the nation as a whole, I turn this week to the words of our two most recent former presidents. First, President George W. Bush, who in an official statement issued on June 2nd said the following, quote, "It remains a shocking failure that many African Americans, especially young African American men, are harassed and threatened in their own country. It is a strength when protesters, protected by responsible law enforcement, march for a better future. This tragedy, in a long series of similar tragedies, raises a long overdue question. How do we end systemic racism in our society? The only way to see ourselves in a true light is to listen to the voices of so many who are hurting and grieving. Those who set out to silence those voices do not understand the meaning of America or how it becomes a better place." Former President Bush goes on to say, quote, "America's greatest challenge has long been to unite people of very different backgrounds into a single nation of justice and opportunity. E pluribus unum." He then goes on to say, quote, "The answers to American problems are found by living up to American ideals, to the fundamental truth that all human beings are created equal and endowed by God with certain rights. We can only see the reality of America's need by seeing it through the eyes of the threatened, oppressed, and disenfranchised," unquote. So where as a nation do we go from here? Former President Barack Obama's remarks from earlier this week provide an answer to this question. In an essay published on June 1st on Medium, a new internet platform where people share ideas and stories, he suggests a two-pronged approach. First, the need to continue peaceful protests across our land, as they represent a genuine and legitimate frustration over a decades-long failure to reform police practices and the broader criminal justice system in the United States, unquote. Second, assuming these protests continue at scale and remain peaceful, President Obama believes America's political system will start paying attention. Quote, "The elected officials who matter most in reforming police departments and the criminal justice system work at the state and local levels. These officials include mayors, city and county commissioners who approve and oversee police practices, and district and state attorneys who decide whether to investigate and ultimately charge those involved in police misconduct. Unfortunately, across the United States, voter turnout in these elections is usually extremely low for local elected officials, especially among young people, which makes no sense given the direct impact these offices have on policing practices and the criminal justice system. So I urge all citizens of all ages to register, to vote, and then follow up once elected officials start their terms. The aim is accountability. And there's no easy way to achieve this aim unless voters stay involved and keep abreast of the work of their elected officials once in office. This is part of the price of citizens performing their civic duty. and it is a price that must be paid to bring about significant and lasting change. More than a century and a half after the end of the Civil War, a century and a half, and passing of the new Bill of Rights, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and 55 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, the United States finds itself still trying to achieve the full promise of its Declaration of Independence. Quote, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. My hope and fervent prayer is that the nation's reaction to the death of Mr. George Floyd begins a transformative process to fulfill this promise in the very near and foreseeable future. Thank you.